Welcome to one more debate in the series, The Activist Museum, Going Deeper. Welcome, Vera and Thomas, and thank you for accepting our invitation. I'll give a bit of context. In February 2024, we were reading an article of the British Museums Association website, and we found out through that article that two German museums, one in Bonn and one in Dresden, had welcomed citizens' assemblies as a way of exploring how they can become more democratic and more relevant institutions. So Thomas, who's one of our guests today, back in 2021 invited Amélie Klein and Vera Sacchetti, Vera is also with us today, as heads of the Summer School on Design and Democracy, which then developed into a further collaboration for a forthcoming exhibition inaugurating on the 30th of May called For All, Redesigning Democracy. And while working on this exhibition, Amélie and Vera proposed the organization of citizens' assemblies. And as I said, two of those assemblies actually took place in two German museums in 2023. Just quickly to give you an overview, each assembly had about 30 people, and our guests then will speak in more detail about them. And they met for over 4 days and were selected by sortition, just like in ancient Athens, so that they could guarantee a broader representation of local communities. Participants in both assemblies were asked how the two museums could evolve to remain relevant, welcoming, inclusive, and diverse public spaces that enable social dialogue on the most pressing issues of these rapidly changing times. So there is a report already with recommendations from the, I hope I pronounce it well, Bundeskunsthalle, and it was released in February, and included things that I must say that didn't surprise us at Access Culture that much, like inclusivity training for staff, simpler, jargon-free language in exhibitions, interactive exhibitions to engage visitors' minds and bodies, co-creation projects, and a permanent citizens' assembly to advise the museum. And the report on Thomas's museum will be out in May, next month. So thank you again, Thomas and Vera. And Thomas, perhaps I'll start with you. Why democracy as a topic for an exhibition? Please turn your mic on.
Yes, so thank you very much, Maria, for this warm welcome, and also to have the opportunity to, together with Vera, we can talk about our ongoing and preparation of the exhibition, but also in particular, also the Citizens Assembly. So, as you have mentioned in the beginning, the history of this collaboration and preparation of the exhibition already started 2-3 years ago. I think we all remember, 2-3 years ago, the world already has been much different than it is today. I think quite a few crises politically, the war in Europe, in Gaza, but also other crises just even sharpened and differentiated also the atmosphere and the climate in our countries, and in particular also forced or questioned the current state of democracy. I think it's quite unusual we're not a particular design museum because our history is rooted in the 19th century as a museum of decorative and craft. However, our focus is very much driven by looking at design and how design also transformed and how design actually can become a transformative power for society and the future. So also grounded in a historic collection, we use these artifacts to see, what can we learn, teach, and look into the future with them, and how can we also speculate into the future. And I think as much as topics as climate change, digitalization, all these, sort of forces in our society also challenge our understanding of negotiating the good or the bad, or just to, enforce debate in general. I think a core issue to this is really democracy, because all these challenges we only can handle or deal with as a community. And I think it was much more driven by a stomach feeling, or how would you translate this in English? It just came out.
It's a gut feeling, isn't it?
What?
I think it's gut feeling.
Yeah, the gut feeling, that, how can actually design or the methodology of design can also be a force or a power in either redesigning, healing democracy. I think design in particular also is, how should I say it? It's also the reason why we are in crisis of democracy. If we look at media, graphic, visual, I mean, there is a whole lot of things that you can say, okay, this is also design driven. And of course, when we started to think about this project 2-3 years ago, and we prepared actually the summer school program, it was really much more about, how learning how and where design sits in society and what it actually can do as a creative power. And I think it was kind of an experiment as well for us to see, what kind of topics pop up and how can we develop this. The idea of the Design Campus summer school and at the Kunstgewerbemuseum is really the idea to have a think tank and a research and development platform for, crucial current topics, always aiming to also transform the institution, the museum, and its future programming. So this is not just, right now, let's look at democracy. Tomorrow we look at something else. I think those topics are so urgent and so crucial also in our daily business as institutions, that it was really about time just to get started. Yeah. And I think it came also through this summer school in debate that it is, of course, not just about talking and debating about design and democracy. It was really also from the very first beginning criticizing our cultural institution as a museum and what kind of role do we play in this system. And yeah, so that was the starting point, I think, of also the exhibition.
Thank you, Thomas. And that's a good cue for my first question for Vera. Before I ask you, Vera, about the citizens' assemblies, I would like to know what is the idea and also the need behind your project, Design and Democracy?
Thanks, Maria, and thanks, Thomas, for that introduction. And hello, everybody. I'm super happy to be here and to discuss this with you. I'm looking forward to the questions and the conversation afterwards. Amelie Klein and myself, we first started thinking about this topic of democracy when in 2019 we were invited to join a network of the OECD that looked at new forms of citizen participation within democracy. And very specifically, it was looking at deliberative democracy and at citizens' assembly as a form to engage citizens in a renewed way within their democratic systems. So, you have the traditional electoral democracy in which we are used to participating in the Western world. You have other democratic paradigms, such as direct democracy, which is something we see here in Switzerland, where I am based, participatory democracy, and so on and so forth, and also this deliberative paradigm, which is a little bit different from the participatory paradigm or the direct democracy, in which it works very much with this sortition that you alluded to at the very beginning. So it's almost as if you have to serve on jury duty. You get selected to come and give your opinion and participate in the decision making, or in the shaping of an urban policy, or in the way in which your government will be thinking about climate policy, and so on and so forth. And it was very interesting to be part of this OECD network, because basically it really allowed us as design curators, Amelie and myself, to see that the way in which we are thinking about design in the contemporary world and the way that this deliberative paradigm works are very similar. There's a lot of overlaps between contemporary design discourse and the democratic discourse. And this is, of course, something that, as Thomas said, design museums should make their business the business of everything that concerns us in our daily lives, because, as we know, contemporary design is something that permeates our daily lives at every single instance and at every level. And so it was then that we both started thinking about how is it that we can continue talking about this. And when Thomas started the Design Campus, and when we were invited to be the first heads of school in 2021, this was a really, really interesting way to start this research in community, you know, because we were given an extraordinary opportunity to invite people that we already also knew were thinking about these topics. We were able to work with students from all over the world also thinking about these topics. And then, as Thomas said, it was very quickly made apparent that this topic is of extreme importance, that we have to continue working on it, and that we have to also, when we look at systems of governance and democratic systems, we cannot just look at governments, we also need to look at museums, because they also emulate the systems of governance that are at the top. In fact, any kind of institution in society emulates the same model of governance that we see at the very top. Yeah. And so it was very interesting for us to start this, you know, we gave it this moniker, Design and Democracy, because for us it's an exploration in various ways of the many ways in which design and democracy overlap. And I should give here a shout out to Claudia Schwalis, who is the person that invited us originally to be part of this OECD network in 2019, and went on then to start her own action research institute called DemocracyNext, that has been a partner and an advisor in this project throughout these years, and of course was very much involved in the citizens' assemblies that we will be discussing.
And why did you think about citizens' assemblies for the development of this exhibition, for this work?
I think that, as Thomas said, we can't just speak about things and then go back to doing exhibitions about whatever it is that we were doing exhibitions about the year before. It's almost as if checking a box. Okay, I did my show about democracy, never have to think about it again. If you're serious about doing the work, it cannot be just a superficial exploration of the ways in which design manifests in democracy. So we're not just talking about ballots and posters and electoral campaigns. We are talking about the design of the system. And if we are talking about different ways in which we could participate, in which we can share power, in which we can question the structure of these institutions, then we need to aim for a deeper level of transformation. And in that sense, running two citizens' assemblies within two museums at the same time, and because these two museums are co-producing this exhibition, and the exhibition will open, as you said, Maria, in Bonn at the end of the month of May, but will then travel to Dresden, where it will open in June 2025. It made a lot of sense to run the process at the same time in both places. And this was, of course, an experiment in what Thomas was just saying, in questioning these institutions that we work within, and the way in which they are governed, the way in which people are allowed to have their say. And by people, I mean the ordinary citizen, which may be also not the person that traditionally goes to the museum.
Yes. Thomas, another report is not out yet regarding your museum, but could you share with us some of the main findings?
Well, I think it's quite interesting, as Vera really said, that it was a great opportunity to do this assembly at both places at the same time. We, of course, picked this collaboration on purpose, since Bonn, of course, is a very representative symbol of German democracy, in particular in the post-war era. And Dresden, of course, has a history of the GDR era. And so we also had the possibility in kind of collaborating and inviting people who have a very kind of different, also democratic history and experience throughout their lifetime. And for us, that was very consciously decided to do this collaboration between Bonn and Dresden in one thing. And I think what was really amazing to see is the engagement of the people. I mean, first of all, that we had so many really confirmations to participate in the process, around 30 people, which we couldn't handle anymore anyway in these processes. But
sorry to interrupt, Thomas. Was this a surprise to you that people actually accepted the invitation,
yes,
that they were eager to participate?
Yeah, so I mean, we really received replies because people were addressed by an official letter from their municipality, that, you know, you are invited to participate in this program of this in this museum on this question. And people were really stunned, you know, why me? Why, you know, why on a museum? And they partly even thought this is a joke. So they called us up and asked, you know, is this serious? And so it was really great. Also, in regard, we had a few elderly people who really called up in their 80s and said, wow, this is amazing. Unfortunately, I'm too old to participate in this. I think that was very strong moments also for us to see, you know, why actually did it took such a long time to get this process started in a way. In regard to your question, it's pretty amazing because we had people with, you know, zero experience in museum or in culture, to people who, of course, heard about the museum, or have been to a museum before, maybe not particularly our museum. So we had an amazing variety of cultural and museum experience. And I think it was from the first moment on, there was still some skepticism, I would say, in the first few hours, maybe. But it was incredible to see how fast there was also a strong boundary between the participants across, you know, all kinds of generations and so on. So that was really amazing to see. And I mean, you listed, you know, some of the recommendations are not so far different from what you have mentioned from Bonn, but there's been also very, you know, basic things, you know, like, you know, just an area where you can sit, rest, and, you know, be by yourself. Things we kind of know from a long time ago, but also to understand that people not necessarily need to get more information, you know, in exhibition spaces. You know, they rather want to have less, but feel welcomed and really engage also with the topic, but not on a constant teaching, learning, you know, mode. So I think that is, and as it was really astonishing to see how many at the end, after the 2 weekends, really signed up to and said, okay, please keep us informed, keep us in the loop. We would like to continue participating in this, which also is something not necessarily to be expected. Also, in particularly in the, let's say, the societal environment of Dresden and East Germany. So I think that was it was really eye-opening, and I think what was really incredible is to see how people participated in a museum without actually being in an exhibition. So it was a completely new way of interacting. It was almost like a new format in a way, you know, to discuss, talk about topics without even showing objects, or not necessarily. So, and one of the most feedbacks we really received was that this was, for most of the people, the very first democratic experience, which was different than just giving your cross at an election.
Yeah. I have two quick follow-up questions for both of you. First of all, I would like to know if the older couple managed to participate or not. They thought they shouldn't.
Well, we kind of thought about other ways of, you know, doing like hybrid access and all these kind of things. We of course considered even, you know, what kind of services can we provide. I mean, we provided services for children care and so on. So I mean, that was, after all, also a budget decision. We simply could not afford extra driving services and things like that. But I think this all needs to be taken into consideration to make it possible. Because there are so many constraints. People, you know, can't or don't want to participate. So I think you really have to create an enormously inviting atmosphere, and also kind of basic services.
Yeah, that brings me to my second follow-up question. You mentioned that in perhaps the first 2 hours there was lots of skepticism, but then a strong bond was created. What you that's natural, yeah. There are people who don't know each other who come together around the table. What do you think helped creating the bond?
Maybe I want to say something here about the operator that ran these citizens' assemblies, because I think it has a lot to do also with the moderation and how you structure the weekends.
Yeah.
We had these assemblies divided over the course of 2 weekends, as you said in the beginning, Maria, and we had 1 weekend in between. So, you know, 1 weekend, then 1 weekend break, and then 1 weekend for the second part of the assembly. And the Nexus Institute that ran these assemblies in both cities, they really did a very good job of moderation. And so I think there is, of course, through this variety of formats that is kind of embedded into the weekend, where you have these bigger plenum sessions and you have focused work in small groups, and you have moments in which you're just chatting to your neighbor that is sitting next to you. You have, of course, the meals, the coffee breaks, and so on. You can create a variety of moments of interaction that allow for the communication to be more and more fluid. And if at the end of the first weekend you already see that cohesion is starting to really show up, I would say that at the second weekend it's usually much more relaxed. At least we observed that in both places. What was also interesting is that we had a kind of a not very common presence in these kinds of processes, because we are also doing an exhibition and we want this exercise to be part and an important part of the exhibition that we are doing. We had a videographer present for the two assemblies, and we had, of course, a team of designers documenting, a team of information designers documenting these two processes to translate them into a visual installation inside the exhibition. And that was also something that at first was received a little bit with curiosity and perhaps resistance, but as the weekend, first weekend and then the second weekend went on, this was welcomed and people were feeling more at ease with it. And of course, you know, if somebody did not want to be filmed or did not want to participate, this was of course respected and so on. But it was for us important to also document these processes and to tell the story, not just because it happened, but also because it is an important part of what the exhibition also wants to say as well.
I was listening to
thought,
you explaining how the moderation took place, how it was structured. I was thinking that's how we should design our lives. You know, small moments, one-to-one, or just one, or bigger groups, meals, they always help. That's how we should be designing our lives, because we lost it a bit on the way. Yeah. Any surprises, good or bad, in the process for any of you?
Well, I think I already told you quite some surprises and that occurred. I think, but it was also, I think one thing we also need to talk about is, even so, as the director of the museum, I'm very curious and interested in these kind of processes. It does not say that my whole team really, you know, sort of has a full understanding, you know, why do or would we need as a museum need to open up. You know, we are experts, and, you know, we are experts in our different kind of professions in the museums. Of course, we have worked in the field of or in participatory models. I mean, this is a long history in museum educational programs. So what is different about this process? And then there was also I think it was also about some kind of skepticism in regard to, you know, why, you know, does we as an institution need to enter this political aspects of society. You know, politics usually is something that is meant not to be part of, you know, like an art history or something. And of course it is heavily. And so this was also a very important process for us as a team in the museum, you know, to start to accept also I would also say a complete shift in society, and also a shift in how people look at institutions and how we as an institution have to transform. Even so, I think we, you know, we're just at the very beginning of the transformation of our institutions. For them, it's already quite far ahead to do these kind of processes. And I mean, just think about the word, the name as curator, who is actually meant to be a gatekeeper of course, knowledge, but also artifacts. So this idea of gatekeeping, you know, whose knowledge is in, is out, who to come in or not. I think this is all an aspect of this. And I think it took me quite some time as well also to make my team be part of this process. And I think that was also part of the design of the workshop, because they have been integrated. And of course, from the very beginning, they wanted to be much more integrated in the process, because they were curious what other things about their work in the museum, and maybe how can they actually inform it.
Yeah.
So how can they kind of guide or manage this, control this situation, you know? And to give up this control, I think, is a major adventure.
Yeah, that's a whole a new debate. Just with the things you shared with us now, I think we should meet in a year's time to find out more about how you dealt with skepticism in the team, which is also expected, I think. Vera, any good or bad surprises for you in the process so far?
I mean, I have this thing about, I think that the trip for me started in 2019 when I first discovered this this model of participation in a democracy. And it's a little bit like religion, you know, it's a little bit like finding Jesus. You either believe in him or you don't, yeah? And I've been very transformed by my encounter with citizens' assemblies and with deliberative democracy in general. And I think that going through this process and experiencing it in person, it was an extremely powerful moment for me. I saw how transformative it was for the people that participated, and I saw how that changed them. I saw how it impacted both museum directions as we went through it, and that was also a very fantastic thing to see. And Maria, you were saying we should talk in a year to see how things went on. I believe that, I mean, as Thomas said, for him, something changed fundamentally, and it's a process that's very interesting to him. I think that for the Bundeskunsthalle in Bonn, it's the same. And what I can hope is that this process can inspire other cultural institutions to take this leap, because it's a leap of faith.
We hope so.
You cannot. It's expensive. It's an investment of time, of your staff, of convincing people that this is the way to go. It is a worthwhile experience. And after going through it, I can 100%, 200% attest to the fact that it is a worthwhile experience. But it is a leap of faith, and I hope that it can, the results and the way that this process has run, I hope it can be inspiring for others, that they also choose to try it out.
Yeah. Are you planning, my last question, because I would like to hear all the colleagues who are with us today, their comments and questions. Are you planning to translate into English, at least, the report from this experience?
Well, the reports yet are not translated. Unfortunately, even the catalog for the exhibition at Bundeskunsthalle has not an English version yet. But of course, we definitely, we know and that we want to have this translated, because this is such an amazing experience and knowledge that needs to be shared. I mean, we're of course still aiming for the funding to make this possible, but I think it is really also, it's just being invited by you, but we've also been invited by other institutions and platforms. There is an urgent hunger for this kind of topics and also experiences. And therefore, I think it's really important also that we share this knowledge. Yes.
Yeah, great. Thank you both very much for this first part of our conversation. I would like to invite our colleagues, whoever wants to turn their cameras on, please do. And if you would like to intervene with a comment or question, you can turn your mic on, or you can write it in the chat if you prefer, whatever feels more comfortable. You can raise your hand or make a sign, whatever also you think is best for you. Now we see more faces, it's really nice. So, dear colleagues, any questions or comments at this point? Please, Aline, yes.
Okay. Hi, Vera and Thomas and everyone who is listening. Thank you for your for sharing your story. Actually, I work at the Contemporary Museum in Ghent at SMAC. A couple of years ago, 4 years ago, I made an exhibition together with children and youngsters. So they curated the exhibition with artworks from our collection. And because I believe the same as you, that this is the future of museums. You have to participate together with your audience and with the public and with the citizens of the city. But you also mentioned it was not easy to engage the rest of your team. And Vera, I made a note of it. You called it a leap of faith. The many curators I encounter, they are very hesitant to work with people. I think it maybe has to do with power and giving up a system that they already know. But they're also afraid that the objects they cherish so much, that the stories of these objects will not be translated enough or have done justice when they will be curated by the public. So I was very interested in if you had some more stories or examples when the shift started to happen with your team.
Who would like to go first?
Well, I think it was already also through the experiences, for instance, with the design summer school, where we had a very diverse participation from people from different cultural backgrounds, but also from different professional backgrounds who joined the summer school. And of course, we did explorations in the museum, in the collection. And it was actually through these participants who pointed out some crucial aspects in the permanent displays. Things that, and of course, my team is also involved in the summer school, and they've been quite skeptical about the summer school from the very beginning as well, because this, brings in new ideas and all these kind of things. But so this is like a learning journey for all of us, not the participants, but also for the team. And, just through these experiences and encounters, for them, it was obvious, what information actually is missing or what people are really concerned and interested about. And since then, and it needs this kind of encounters and experience really to make people, understand, also to start to reflect their work, and also, and I think from that moment on, it was much easier really to integrate these new kind of ideas. I think what is really different is, of course, we have been working with, like focus groups, or we have invited diverse groups, but it's very different if you invite people that you have no clue about, people that you not personally, we do not do a participatory project with this school group because it's my children's class. So I think then you also can say we work participatory because we have this group, but it's already biased through something. And I think this is the really experience that you only can experience with this amazing effort. I mean, Vera said it takes some investment. It's financially, time-wise, because you also have to the resources of your team and all these kind of things. And it's, of course, you can take a shortcut and say, okay, I invite a focus group, and then it's already kind of diverse. But I think it's very much different if you do it in this kind of deliberative processes. And I think it's something you have to keep on doing. It's something now we are in a process, and it creates some kind of an awareness, but it is an ongoing process and transformation. And I mean, to be honest, to see how this really influences our future way of producing or exhibitions or any kind of formats, we will see. We're really in a learning process right now, and I think it's very important to take your team by the hand. So you really have to bring them in, because if they are not involved in the process from the very beginning and in almost all kind of details, it's like a parallel world. So and I think there is only one chance to do this, I would say, because if they feel not integrated or left out, I think then they, in the future, they will be much more skeptical about these kind of processes. So, I mean, to be honest, it really challenges me as a director day by day, you know. I mean, I think I could just say, well, let's do it the way we have done it the past years. It's much easier because everybody's just in his tunnel of, you know, setting up the program, doing the next project, and so on and so forth. And so I think it's really, it's sand in the machine, and you have to really, you know, take this as a you know, it's a part of the whole process.
And it's a process that creates, sorry, Vera.
I just wanted to
create expectations as well, yeah, both in the team, yeah. You need to take care of your team and get them involved and let them know, but also for the participants, the citizens, who will be expectant now to see what will happen in the future. Yes, Vera, please.
No, I just wanted to add a couple of thoughts. Certainly creating this welcoming environment has to be done both ways, not just for the participants, but also for the team as well. I think this idea that you have one opportunity to basically host this process and invest the time, the means to run it in a way that can be understood and sort of you can hold the importance that this kind of process can actually have is the only way that it will be as transformative as you wish it to be, basically. And I find that, Aline, you were talking about maybe it has something to do with loss of control. Yes, of course it has to do. For me, the most beautiful thing about citizens' assemblies is that they make clear that there is no difference between the expert and the layman, because if you give enough information to people for people to work with, everybody can make an informed decision and we can talk to each other as equals. And this is absolutely incredible. And we should actually listen to each other much more and not, like Thomas says, you know, just keep going, do the program, do the exhibition and so on. The whole process, for me, perhaps the most violent awakening that I had from the whole thing, what in Portuguese I would call an enormous chapada de luva branca, which is basically a wake-up call, is that we can be having the most illuminated discussions that we might want to have inside our own cultural institutions. But these discussions are not even reaching anyone outside the door of our museum because the people don't even feel welcome to walk in, you know? So we might be discussing the most brilliant things, but they're not reaching the people that we want to reach, you know? So it starts really there. It was very strong, that experiencing that, I would say.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Any
and
more
I think
questions? Sorry, Thomas. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what adds to this is really, I mean, it's also the need of our institutions to have a relevance in society. And I think that is particularly something we really have to think about as a museum that also deals with design processes, you know, and it's, you know, of course you can talk about design history, fancy, beautiful objects, and this will have a right moment in the future too, but there is so much more to explore. And I think I think to design the process of the citizens' assembly is a perfect example of what design, you know, in its original idea really can create. I mean, I do really remember when also this whole kind of discipline was, you know, developing in all kinds of new forms and arms, like social design, open design, conceptual design, everything that is beyond industrial or product design. And of course, we as a museum said, you know, how actually can we start to, you know, collect this in our museum? How can we represent this? How can we make this? How can I bring a designed process in a museum? of course, I cannot put it in a vitrine. I have to experience it and also live through it in a way. So I think this is, to me, it was really the most convincing way to really bringing a social design process in a museum.
Thank you, Thomas. Let me check the time. We have about 10 more minutes. So any more comments? Yes, Ines, please.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you. And thank you so much for your sharing. It is really inspiring. And I hope to see and to study more of the work that you have shared and the research. I was wondering what you just started to say, Thomas, as you are embracing such different methods of engaging and of working within the museum and with people. How do you feel that the exhibition, the final exhibition, has changed? Does it look less like a museum exhibition? If you don't have, because the way we represent and the way we show the work is very political, right? So how did your exhibition look less like a museum exhibition?
A good question. And Vera, you need to help me with that.
Well, there's a lot of seating.
There's a lot of seating.
A good starting point, Vera. Yes.
And there's a lot of opportunities to engage with the work in a more calm and focused way. I think that there is an element of storytelling that is natural to an exhibition that is, of course, maintained. The exhibition has a story, and that story is independent of the Citizens' Assembly and the question that was posed. Now, the Citizens' Assembly tried to look inside the museum and ask, please deliberate with us. How can the museum become a more inclusive and democratic space for the 21st century? Yeah. And that story is a big part of the exhibition. But now we are still doing an exhibition about democracy. We are still talking about what is democracy, what is electoral democracy, what is participatory democracy, what is deliberative democracy. How can you also shape this system that you live in a more active way? And so I would say that the content of the exhibition did not change, but our care towards how it is that we are communicating that content was, of course, reinforced by the experience of going through the assemblies together. And I think that that, of course, was very, again, part of this awakening thing that I was referring to beforehand. And that, of course, goes to very basic questions, such as how big are you printing the text on the wall? How big are your label text? Do you have enough seating options? Can people actually read or listen to the films? Can they understand them? Are there subtitles? Are they big enough for people to actually be able to engage with the work? So everything needs to reach people. We need to make an extra step, an extra investment in making sure the texts are written in an accessible way, making sure that we can work with the mediation team to really convey the story in the most appropriate way. So that would be, in short, my answer. I don't know if Thomas wants to add something to that.
Yeah, well, I think it is also a way to see, I mean, now that we worked on this exhibition for so long, and I think it was also a parallel process of developing the exhibition and also the Citizens' Assembly. I think if we would maybe start from now and say, now let's do an exhibition on design and democracy after we have finished the Citizens' Assembly, we might have go a different way. So I think there are a million ways of doing an exhibition, of course. But and I think, to me, and I was always I'm not such an object-focused museum person in a way. So I think also for the future is, what kind of new formats does this open up? I mean, as a matter of fact, all exhibitions that we have in the program, we also could start with a citizens' assembly questioning, core questions of the exhibitions, and then see what comes out of this. And I think this is a process I would like to come to. Of course, this takes an enormous way of programming. I mean, I think it's a bit tricky. I think it's also a matter of long-term, short-term processes, because this takes time. Citizens' assembly is nothing you can really do in, I think this kind of processes you have to engage also in a longer time frame. Then the question is how actual or current can you be with the topics of your exhibitions. But I think it really opens up new ways of developing, preparing exhibitions, and then also, again, what means research in preparation of the exhibitions. I mean, so I think this really opens up new routes for curatorship in a way. I think it becomes much more a way of moderating as well, and it's still not servicing the citizens. It also takes your brain and your knowledge to mentor or to moderate these processes. And I think this is really something I would like to see in the curatorial educational programs, because this is something, people that I actually work with in the museum, they are traditionally trained art historians, they know their history, they know their objects and everything. But to have these social skills in moderating, but also using moderation in aiming for a new perspective on a subject to come to new findings, I think this really is, to me, the most exciting way of curatorship of the future.
Thank you. Time for one last question. We have about 3 more minutes. Please, François.
Thank you, Maria and Thomas and Vera. It's very interesting discussion. I just wanted to ask, listening to this last part, the extent to which the members of the Citizens' Assembly can decide for themselves what they want to talk about.
Who would like to answer first? Good question.
So just to repeat your questions.
Sorry,
it's just if the Citizens' Assembly
Yes.
can set its own agenda to decide. So you invite the people to come and have a Citizens' Assembly for 4 days in the museum. Then maybe the starting point is, or at least part of it, is to see whether the agenda for the discussion is one that they are in. Maybe there are things they want to talk about that aren't on the agenda.
So can people also say, we would like to talk about this or that, if it was not in your initial agenda?
Maybe I just clarify a little bit about the process. So a Citizens' Assembly always starts with the first weekend, or the first part of the first weekend is about giving information to the citizens. So of course you invited them there based on a question that you want them to think about and deliberate on. But then of course you give them information to work with, no? And based on the information that they are given, they themselves, in small group discussions, they come up with the topics that they want to talk about. So it's not that you give them an agenda, the agenda comes through the discussions. And very quickly, I don't know if you were also mentioning something about the actual topics that the museum should be focusing on or not. The conversation didn't even get there. We basically talked very much about themes of accessibility, of engagement, of access, really of people that want to feel invited and participate in these spaces, but they don't feel that they have the agency to do it, you know? So I suppose if it was a different citizens' assembly or in a different place with a different, I don't know, we can speculate if they would start also talking about the content of what the museum is addressing. But the agenda is very much defined by the citizens themselves, and not the other way around.
Okay, Vera.
So
Thank you.
actually, I really would like to pick up one of the notes of the chat here, because who is it? Wenke Maderbacher, who mentioned that she said just include museum educators. And of course, I think they are important partners in moving this process. And I think it was also in our case that we had the support actually to do the citizen assembly here in Dresden, because we were running on special funds to make this possible. And I think it is very urgent and important also in actually to also develop programs or even exhibitions and topics in collaboration with the educational department. And of course, I think that this is also something I still have to struggle with my team, because they regularly start with, you know, curators or who start with their own topics and ideas, and then they develop it further, and then they at some stage contact the educators because they want to have their topics communicated. And this is exactly what I mentioned in the beginning. I think there even should not be a differentiation between curation and education. I think this needs to be a joint educational program at any kind of whatever curatorial or art and history school. So I think we really need to work to close this gap, or to really think in these categories of curation and education. And I think thank you for pointing this out.
Very good point. Thank you all so much. It was a very interesting discussion. I'm sorry, Wenke, we don't have more time for one more question, but we can forward it to our guests if you would like to write to us. I think quite a few people will be traveling to Germany after May the 30th. Very curious. And perhaps Thomas reminded us that the curator is a word associated to a gatekeeper. And maybe we should take a step back and say curator is a carer of objects, a carer of stories, a carer of people. And maybe we could reconcentrate, refocus on this. Thank you all so much for your time, especially to Vera and Thomas, of course, but also to everybody else who was here with us today. The link to this recording will be sent to you perhaps tomorrow. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Thomas and Vera.